David Reynolds needed a change. The city pressed in on him, stifling his creativity. His new home, a Victorian manor in the countryside, promised peace and quiet. It stood alone, shrouded by ancient trees. He hoped the solitude would unlock his writer's block. The house was a stele, practically abandoned. The realtor spoke in hushed tones about its history. He didn't elaborate, just shook his head and handed over the keys. David, eager for a fresh start, paid little attention. He stepped inside, the scent of dust and old wood filling his nostrils. A sense of peace settled over him. This was his sanctuary now. He explored the house, each room filled with antique furniture draped in white sheets. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the heavy curtains. Yet one thing stood out, gleaming even in the dimness: mirrors. Large, ornate mirrors adorned nearly every wall. Their silver backing was tarnished with age, giving them a cloudy, almost sinister quality. David ran a hand over one, feeling a strange chill despite the summer heat. David settled into a routine. His days spent writing in the spacious study. Sunlight streamed through the bay windows, illuminating the room. He often found himself staring into the large mirror above the fireplace. It was impossible to ignore, reflecting his every move. He began to notice something odd. His reflection seemed off. A subtle shift in his expression, a lingering movement even when he stood still. He dismissed it as fatigue. Long hours hunched over his typewriter were taking their toll. Still, the feeling persisted. He'd catch his reflection out of the corner of his eye, a fleeting glimpse of something unfamiliar. One evening, while working late, he heard it. A whisper, faint and indistinct, coming from the mirror. He spun around, heart pounding. The house was silent. He blamed the creaking of the old house, the wind whistling through the eaves. Yet deep down, a seed of unease had been planted. The whispers grew stronger, more frequent. They seemed to emanate from the mirrors, slithering into his mind. He couldn't make out the words, but their tone was unmistakable, a mix of urgency and malice. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares plagued him, filled with shadowy figures and echoing voices. He tried to ignore it, to convince himself it was stress or the house settling. But the line between reality and reflection began to blur. He'd find himself staring into a mirror, unable to look away. His reflection moved independently, mimicking his actions, but with a sinister twist. A smile stretched too wide, eyes glinting with an unnatural light. He needed answers. He began researching the history of the house, scouring local archives and libraries. The librarian, a frail woman with a knowing look, directed him to a dusty volume on local law. As he flipped through the brittle pages, a name jumped out at him: Elias Reynolds. Elias Reynolds, a painter of some renown, had lived in the house a century earlier. He was known for his haunting portraits, his subjects often appearing as if alive on the canvas. David felt a chill run down his spine. The resemblance in their last names was unsettling. He delved further, his fingers tracing the faded ink. He discovered Elias's descent into madness. The painter became obsessed with mirrors, claiming they were gateways to another world. He'd lock himself in his studio for days, ranting about his reflection coming alive, taunting him. Then Elias vanished. The house stood empty for years, whispers of his fate echoing through the town. Some said he went mad and took his own life. Others whispered of a darker end, pulled into the very world he sought to capture on canvas. David shut the book, his heart pounding in his chest. He looked around the study at the mirrors reflecting his every move. He could feel their gaze, cold and calculating. His reflection stared back, a mocking smile playing on its lips. He realized with chilling certainty that he wasn't alone in the house. Elias's obsession, his fear, it was here, trapped within the mirrors, and now it had a new target: